the transgender Roman empress who killed people with flowers. I'm Riley, and welcome to history that they forgot to teach you in school. This week's episode is about the Roman empress Elagabalus. Now I've split this video up into a few parts. First one is the weird religious shit that she did. Second is her love life, then her wild parties, and finally her death. Empress Elagabalus was born in the Roman province of Syria, and she was the head priest to the god Elagabalus. Now she came into power in the year 218 AD by a plot devised by her grandmother. At the age 14, she held one of the most powerful positions in the world. And to say that that power went to her head would be an understatement. Being a high priest to the god Elagabalus, which is the same god she gets her name from, that was just given to her posthumously, her actual name being Antonious. First thing she did as empress was build a huge fucking temple to the god. And like any good Roman temple, this housed the sacred treasure of the god. Elagabalus' case was a big black cone-shaped rock. Now once a year, this rock would be put on the back of a driverless chariot, and Elagabalus would walk backwards in front of it as if guiding it and parade it through the city. And I'm not super knowledgeable on horses, but I'm assuming this was all a facade and a horse knows to walk on the fucking road. Now she wasn't very popular with the Roman public, and there were many reasons for it. One of the big ones though is that she took all of the sacred treasures from all of the temples around Rome, placed them in the temple of Elagabalus, stating that this god was above even Jupiter, and that if you wanted to worship anyone, you also had to worship Elagabalus. And she did some other crazy shit in this temple. One of my favorite rituals, was that she locked up tigers, monkeys, and snakes, and amongst other animals, and fed them nothing but human genitals. Let that sink in. Right, her love life. Now, she was married 5 times in her 4-year rule, and one of those was to a Vestal virgin, which, as the name implies, was a big no-no. Like, the Romans were pissed. Super pissed. But she did this so she could birth godlike children, since they were both the high priests and priestesses of their respective deities. Like, she was literally trying to make the next Hercules. Her husband, though, was a famous chariot racer, and she went to watch him race once. He crashed and his helmet fell off, and as it did, his beautiful golden curls perfectly framed his face. Falling in love instantly, she whisked him off to the palace to be wed. Now, this is one of the stories where her trans identity really shines through, because she was never his husband, always his wife or his mistress, and there was hell to pay if that wasn't respected, which is kind of awesome. Stories like this are also why I'm using she, her pronouns. If you do your own research, which you should definitely do because it's fascinating, everyone will use he, him, including the ancient sources, because trans terminology is not something that they had back in the Roman time. So it is definitely terminology that I am placing upon her. However, this is because not only with every man she was always his mistress or wife rather than his husband. She would continuously try and dress and act as femininely as possible, using makeup and wigs. All her clothes and jewelry were to that effect, as well as attempting to pay doctors to give her a very, very early form of GRS. Now, her and her husband's relationship wasn't normal. She would often get caught cheating so that he would beat her. Weird, I know, but I'm not going to kink shame. She would do this a lot, and most of the time claimed that she was actually learning how to please him better. She was, however, always on the lookout for very well-endowed men. She even opened up the palace baths to the public so she would have a constant supply of them. And any man that she did favour would quite often get very powerful positions at court. Now, she found this one man, and she was rather stricken by his sizable asset, and so she took a private bath and dinner with him and spent the entire time lying on his chest, sighing as if she was a lover. Now, the husband, as you can imagine, was less than impressed, so he did the only logical thing he could think of. He poisoned his wife. And it wasn't evil. He didn't try and kill the man, only to make it so he couldn't perform the deity he wanted to perform. After what I'm assuming anyway is a rather short, embarrassing and flaccid night, the man was not only chased out of the palace but of Rome itself. Now, this probably in hindsight saved his life, because if he would have replaced the husband, would have died when he died a couple of years later. So she was also a very keen sex worker. She would often empty up brothels of Rome so that she could conduct the sex work herself, and there was even a specific room within the palace for her to do this type of work within the palace walls. According to some sources, she would even travel with around 60 carriages just full of sex workers and give them speeches as if a general was giving speeches to an army. Now, of the time, most Roman sex workers were slaves or indentured workers. So she would go to the brothels and just buy/free them all, which is kind of fucking awesome. Now, her parties were fucking infamous. She used what looks to be the first instance of a whoopee cushion with her more kind of pompous guests. And she really hated this like older Roman official, like up their own ass type of person. and she would take every opportunity to mess with them, especially by asking them about their kind of all sex lives. Not love life, but sex lives and mistresses. Like their friend who like draws on you or shaves your eyebrows off when you pass out at a party. Just way more extreme and with way more power. She would often release animals like bears, lions, leopards into rooms full of sleeping drunk guests. Now these animals were harmless, which I'm assuming just means they were like declawed and defanged. But a bear doesn't need claws to kill you. Same with a lion or a leopard, like they're fucking huge. She would also fill rooms with flowers, which sounds lovely. You know, you wake up to flowers, it sounds great. Until you realize that these were enough flowers to suffocate people. Something that happened was people would go to her parties, get so drunk that they would pass out, and then she would drown them in flowers. That's just fucked. Once her reign started to go downhill, and she had a prophecy about her death, so she started to plan for it. She made cords out of crimson and violet silk. She made swords out of gold and a tower gilded with gold and jewels. Also that no one would have died or would ever die in the same way as her ever again. In the end, her death was brutal but not glamorous. Her and her mother got invited to the Praetorians' camp for a meeting. There she was beheaded, her corpse dragged around Rome by a chariot and then thrown in the river. She was replaced by her cousin, of all people. Now if you like this episode, don't forget to like the video and subscribe.